Hello, everyone. Uh, Good afternoon. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. The scheduled start time of the FDP is 3:30 p.m. We allowed participants to join and to this live YouTube webcast, and hence we shared the link of YouTube live 30 minutes before the schedule start. So let's wait for as many possible candidates, participants to join. My God, my God. I will switch off this. At your end, nothing, this should not be an issue actually. Now it stopped, right? Hello, hi. I hope that I'm audible to all of you. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your overwhelming response to this FDP. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. We will start the FDP sharp at 3:30. Let's wait for some more time to allow participants to join us on YouTube Live. Good afternoon. We are about to start the FDP. Stay tuned. Very good afternoon. Welcome to this FDP. We are going to begin the proceedings, and I'm going to, uh, start the first day of FDP. I am thank you for your joining this FDP program. We have received more than 1,000 registrations, and quite a few of the participants have joined us on YouTube Live, and some of the participants are in the process of joining here directly on the Zoom platform. So, I mean, let's allow a couple of minutes more for everyone to join here as many as possible, and then we can start the presentation on of the first day. I will be keeping everyone joining here on the Zoom on mute, but you may type your questions in the chat box. Whenever possible, I will allow. I will read those questions and respond to your questions. This is just to avoid any background noise while the FDP is being delivered. So it's actually a good idea to and good practice to keep everybody on mute, and then it allows also you to type your questions, and I can always read it and address those. So it becomes convenient for both of us. Thank you. I am Ajay Bhagwat, Director of Inpods India, and I represent Inpods India. Also, I'm part of the sales and business development team. I look after the sales in the north region of India, and that gives me a lot of opportunity to interact with very senior educators from across India who work in at various capacity in private universities or autonomous colleges. And also we get a chance to speak to and interact with senior educators who work as consultants or advisors um, for the institutions, and they are into advisory services for accreditations, outcomes based education, and that also gives us an opportunity to learn continuously about outcomes based education. So I'm going to share some of these insights that I have gained over a period of time, last 7 to 8 years, and I, you know, I believe that these insights might be useful for you to implement outcomes-based education at your institution if you are thinking of implementing it from a scratch now. And those who have already been working in the environment of outcomes-based education, they also may get a few new addition, insights from this presentation, as well as from the interactions that we will have with other um, faculty members, teachers joining this webinar, FDP. These interactions probably will help us learn more and new things about outcomes-based education. So overall outline of this FDP is um as follows. On the day one, we will discuss some of the basics and a few advanced level concepts of outcomes-based education. And this will be a case study approach. So we will, we'll consider a case of designing a program, and then we will take this as an example, and how outcomes based education comes in picture when uh, if somebody is given a role of designing a program, how what steps are involved in this from the perspective of outcomes based education uh, is going to be discussed by us on the day one. And on the day two and day three, we will have elaborate discussion on how to measure the outcomes, how to analyze those, how to identify slow learners, and what remedial actions could be planned to improve their performance. Now, while this is being discussed, we will have to consider many parameters for to measure the performance of the students, and the reflection of these parameters to be considered for measurement of outcomes of the students actually are have to be considered while the program is being designed. So it's this design process of program has to encompass the steps involved in analysis of weaker students and remedial actions. Unless this is well thought through upfront, the design of program is not complete. And this is what we will discuss in the next 3 days. I'm hoping that our participants who have joined on YouTube are also able to uh, you know listen to me clearly. My voice is reaching them. There could be some lag, and those who have joined here directly on Zoom are obviously they are listening to me in real time. But on Zoom to YouTube, there will be some lag of few seconds, so it's like it's going to be a little delay for them. I hope that this goes smoothly. And let's review this after this day one. And in case there is a change required in the delivery of this FDP, we can consider that looking at the experience that we will have today of delivering this FDP in this manner, Zoom and YouTube Live. So let me now introduce you to some of the key concepts, and then let's begin the discussion of this case study approach of program design. The terminology that we use in outcomes-based education is uh, when we have to consider the undergraduate and postgraduate programs, such as BSc, BCom, BAs, we have to stop calling them as courses. These are programs in the terminology used in outcomes-based education. And the programs like these have courses like corporate tax, economics, or microeconomics, stock market. These are the courses. If you take example of an engineering program, it could be a database management system, theory of machines, right? Structural design analysis could be the examples of courses. So when we refer program outcomes and when we refer course outcomes, those are at the level of the program and at the course. So, and if we, that's the reason it is important for us to clarify this terminology right upfront. Otherwise, whenever I say course outcomes, there will be a lot of confusion. And if you start relating that with, uh, you know, BSc, BCom level outcomes, then there will be huge confusion. So whenever we refer to program outcomes, those are at the level of either undergraduate or a program postgraduate program level, and course outcomes are related to the subjects or the courses like microeconomics or stock market. So let's look at this definition quickly before we move further. Outcomes of education are what the student should be able to do at the end of the program or a course or an instructional unit. Quite a few times I have come across with outcomes design done a little differently, may not be, and which the process that was followed to design the course outcomes wasn't actually meeting the requirements of the outcomes based education. So what happens is that uh, we take the units of the course which are given in our textbook, and then we try to associate the outcome to each of these units, and then try to consider those as course level outcomes. But that is not the right practice. Those could be called as unit level outcomes and not the course level outcomes. To design the course level outcomes, one has to have very one has to think about the program level outcomes, the knowledge these courses are delivering to meet the outcomes at the program level, and based on that the course outcomes have to be designed. We are going to discuss this a lot in the first day of our FDP. And when it comes to uh, the second part of this definition. Let me read it out. Outcomes based education is an approach to education in which decisions about the curriculum are driven by the exit learning outcomes that the student should display at the end of the program or the course. I will be able to show you why the outcome based education is about decisions to be taken for uh, refinement of curriculum, why it is important, how the analysis of outcomes helps you in taking decisions about the curriculum. I'll show you this with some concrete examples, and I'll show you how closely outcomes based education is linked with curriculum design. And that is why in NAC accreditation process, the criteria one is fully devoted to curricular aspects, and in which now you will find a stress has been given, an emphasis has been given to designing outcomes, program level as well as course level outcomes. And that is actually a step forward to achieve these curriculum level decisions by implementing outcomes based education. And the third part of this definition is that outcomes based education is about continuous improvement of outcomes. And I'm also going to show you, constantly I will be able to show you concrete examples of how continuous improvement is possible in the students learn performance, or a student's ability to achieve those desired learning outcomes, how it closely the OBE process is associated with continuous improvement. So our theme of the first day, and actually for the whole FDP, is case study approach of program design. So I'm going to request you to think. I'm going to request you to think of a situation like this. So I know that those who are associated with affiliated colleges may not get a chance to design a program, although each one of us has an ability to design a program, but in practically we may not get that opportunity to design a program from a scratch. Imagine that a particular program that we are going to design did not exist or doesn't exist right now, and this is something, this is a task given to each one of us, regardless of which institute we represent, whether it's an affiliated college or autonomous college or a private university or a state university. Let's keep that, forget that for a moment, and consider ourselves as an educator, and think about using our wisdom in designing a program. Now, if this task is given to us, and if this program did not exist in the past at all, then what steps are involved in program design have to be discussed by us. The here when so let's begin thinking about the steps involved in program design. The first step that is involved in program design is to think about the students who are going to take admissions to this new program, and what these students will achieve at the end of let's say 3 years or 4 years or 2 years, depending upon what program you are thinking of designing. What at the end of the graduation process, what outcomes they will achieve, that has to be first of all considered. It's very important first step. And unless and until we start our program design journey by considering these outcomes to be achieved by the students, it is not possible for us to think about what courses have to be planned as a part of this program. you know that if this program is supposed to be of 4 semesters, then there would be at least 18 to 20 different courses. If it is of 3 years, then it will be 25 to 30 courses. If it is 4 years, then naturally it is 35 to 40 courses. So this is a kind of the schema of the program design that we will have to finally decide, and the baseline for deciding what courses have to be there is the baseline of program level outcomes. So how do I consider that the question that comes to our mind is, how do I know that what graduate attributes or the outcomes have to be considered for my program? So for that, many educators would refer to graduate attributes. What graduate attributes are? These are the these are this is a set of individually assembled outcomes that are components indicative of the graduate's potential to acquire competence to practice at the appropriate level. So, uh, the graduating student going out of the gate after the final paper is done with, this student who is going out of the gate is possessing some characteristics, is possessing some knowledge, some skills, and some attitude. And these combinedly, these three things is going to help this student achieve something in the life after the education, higher education, either to get married, as simple as that, or uh, take a job in a desired field of application, or become an entrepreneur, or simply go for higher education. And but even for going to higher education, the knowledge and the skill that is achieved by the student is required to be it is definitely, it has to be in alignment with the requirements of the higher education. Such, and also the knowledge, skill, and the attitude has to be in line with uh, the the field of work the student is going to be if the student goes for a job. And that's why what graduate attributes the student has to achieve is the first baseline that we have to think about. So there are some examples of I would say there are some. This is a standard taxonomy of graduate level attributes which is available. Many researchers have agreed that graduate attributes should be divided into knowledge, skill, and attitude. Many accreditation bodies have accepted these as a reference, as a baseline for defining the outcomes to be achieved by the graduating students. If you look at this list of graduate attributes, these are divided into knowledge, skill, and attitude. So now the next step is that is in our program designing case study. The next step is to think about how many of these attributes are important for the program that we are designing. So I may say that knowledge, disciplinary knowledge is required anyway. From the skill, I may not pick and choose all the skills mentioned here for my program, which I am designing, because some of these skills may not be relevant. Likewise, some of these attitudes, I believe, uh, are not sufficiently covered. I may have to add my own attitude types, right, or attributes, rather attitude attributes, and then I will create my own set of graduate attributes, and then I will think about designing the program. And that is when, once you pick your the these attributes which are relevant for your program and create your own set of graduate attributes, that point onwards, those graduate attributes are called as program outcomes. or program learning outcomes. In short form, this is called as PLO, program learning outcomes, or program outcomes. So this is the fundamental difference between the graduate attributes and the program outcomes. So once you are ready with your set of program outcomes, next step is thinking about how the students will achieve these program outcomes, what courses will help them achieve it. And that is why we have to create a matrix like this, in which you will have to think about the program outcomes at one side, and which are divided into knowledge, skill, and behavior. And then think about which course will help the students achieve what program outcomes. So there could be various courses like these, which will involve association of with multiple outcomes. So here in this case, for example, course 2 is not only helping the students achieve the program outcome 1, but also PO3 and also PO5. There could be course 5, which is helping students achieve PO4, PO5, and PO7 also. So this is the way a course can help student achieve one or more program outcomes. So it's a combination of, it's a the content of the course is obviously going to address multiple program level outcomes when the student goes through the course. And combinedly, over a period of time, from first semester to the last semester of the program, the student is supposed to go through all the courses, and hence the student is supposed to have achieved all the program outcomes which you believe have to be achieved by the students as a part of the education process that student goes through. And this is what is called as program outcomes. I would say it is called as program articulation matrix. There is a question, so I think let me check whether, okay, there has been a kind of input to me that I should speak little loudly. I'll try to do that. Yes. I was just checking, how the things are happening on YouTube Live. Quite a few faculty members have joined there already. So if you have any question, please feel free to write that into the chat box. So let's move on. So now the next step is to think about how will you identify the gaps in the students' learning outcomes. This is one of the most important steps involved in program designing. And this is what is going to give you indirectly or directly an input about what assessments you will design. You have now designed the courses, right? The next step is to design assessments, and for that, why the assessments have to be designed? Obviously, to find the gaps in the outcomes. The gaps in the outcomes is very important concept here. It could be the gaps at the course level or at the program level, and hence this is an input for us to go to the next step, and the next step is designing of the assessments. For that, we have to think about what should be the mechanism for identifying the gaps in the outcomes. What are gaps? Gap means, uh, is there any way to measure whether or not the students are achieving those desired learning outcomes? Now, student comes to the institute, takes the admission. Primarily, the teaching learning process happens every day. And when the student goes out of the institute as a graduated student is seeking, either a job, or, becoming an entrepreneur, or can go to higher education, right? And are the students, are able to go to their desired field of work after the graduation? And if not, why? Are they failing to achieve certain requirements of those jobs or higher education, or becoming an entrepreneur? Did they miss anything? And this is the kind of input that has to be continuously uh, you know kind of continuously, these input have to come to you as a part of your feedback mechanism. And that is why many accreditation bodies suggest that even after the student is graduated, surveys have to be conducted, alumni survey or employer surveys, and feedback should be taken from them to know whether the students graduated from our institute have been able to perform as per the desired competencies that of the job or of the higher education. And based on that, the refinement of the curriculum has to be done. However, it's too late before you gather the feedback from employers or alumni. A lot of action is happening every day in the institution, and this correction, course correction, or the correction in the learning outcomes achievements of this can be done on day-to-day basis. And the tools for that to happen uh, is the uh, is the designing of the assessment, designing of questions, and that is nothing but the core teaching learning process, right? And that, so the whole reflection of the gaps to be identified in the knowledge, skill, and attitude level outcomes goes to teaching learning process. And that is why it becomes important for us to think about what exactly the teaching and the learning process is, from the perspective of the knowledge to be delivered by the teacher, and from the perspective of the absorbing that knowledge. That is one process. And secondly, and the most importantly, when we are thinking about designing assessments, then finally we reach the level of designing the questions. And then how do we ask the question, what level of the student learning process I must evaluate them? And these are the kind of questions we have to address when we are thinking about our program design, and taking our program design to the next level of designing the tools for assessments and designing questions for our assessments. So these are the two important steps that we are going to now address. And then we will go to the step of uh, outcomes design. And this process is extremely interesting. Let's go through that. Before that, let me see whether there are any questions. Okay, so far there are no questions, but I would request if you have any questions. So if you look at the teacher's teaching process, right? What is happening every day in the classroom? The teacher is teaching some knowledge about the which is to be delivered by the course. And why this course exists? Because this course is supposed to help the student achieve some program level outcomes, and that's why this course exists. And so this course may be delivering factual knowledge, or conceptual knowledge, or procedural knowledge, or metacognitive knowledge. These are the four knowledge dimensions that will be applicable to any course of any faculty. This is a fundamentals, and the this is a fundamental knowledge dimension which will be visible everywhere in all the courses. Doesn't matter whether it's engineering program or law or education or commerce course, it will be there. What does the factual, conceptual, procedural, metacognitive knowledge mean? I have given this little explanation at the bottom of the screen of this slide. Factual is knowledge of terminology. Conceptual is theories, models, structures. Procedural is knowledge of subject-specific skills and algorithms. And metacognitive is self-assessment. We are going to discuss this in detail. So let's start with now understanding what is happening at the student side. So teacher is teaching these knowledge levels, And you can also relate this with your course and try to find out whether your course is delivering factual or conceptual knowledge, or more of procedural knowledge, less of conceptual, right? Are there any opportunities for you to make the student more um, aware about his or her um ability to learn something? That is about the self assessment. Are you helping the student to, let's say, asking questions which are creating situations in which the student has to take a position, or let's say there is a blood bank camp has to be set up, and then you have created a team, you want to create a team, and you are asking a question like, who wants to participate? Are the people ready to volunteer, come forward? How many of those are ready to contribute in such activities? And that is the kind of situation the teacher has to create to assess the metacognitive knowledge dimension. So it is there everywhere. You can't remove it separately so easily. And so obviously we don't have a separate course to teach metacognitive knowledge. This is a value system, and that has to be created, and this has to be a part of your program design. And what does it mean? How to design the assessments to be able to deliver the metacognitive knowledge? We are going to discuss that also, today, little later. Now, our current focus primarily would be on the three dimensions: factual, conceptual, and procedural. And let's look at how the student is absorbing this knowledge. Are there any steps involved at the student's end? Obviously, there are. And these steps are: remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Uh, and these are also considered to be, and also known as Bloom's taxonomy levels, BTL, right? And this is actually, somebody would say, revised Bloom's taxonomy, RBT. So they all refer to the same thing. They are talking about cognitive process, and this is applicable to the human beings, any human being. So that's why it is also applicable to the students. So anything that is explained to a student which was totally new, the student will try to first of all remember it, and then understand it, applies it, right? And that is what is the process of cognition. So knowledge dimensions we have covered, and now we are going to discuss a little deep more about the cognitive process. So when you can refer this little explanation given by me at the bottom of the screen. Cognition is the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thoughts, experience, and the senses. Recalling, interpreting, organizing, testing, producing, constructing are the examples of these six levels. And as I mentioned, these cognitive process is also known as Bloom's taxonomy level, BTL or RBT, which is revised Bloom's taxonomy. So what is remember? Remembering when which shows that student will exhibit memory of previously learned material by recalling the facts, terms, basic concepts, and answers. What is happening right now as a part of this FDP? I'm actually talking about a lot about factual and conceptual knowledge right now, right? Program design, and then we are using various. Will be using progressively some models, and then that will be the example of procedural knowledge. And when we would apply those models to kind of analyze something and learn something out of it, that means that we are reaching, also it's a deeper procedural knowledge that is required there to be able to use these models and analyze. So it's application of what we are going to do. So naturally we will on these cognitive process dimension, we have to go pretty fast from remembering to understanding, then applying that, analyzing that, right? And also to be able to evaluate something. But we may not be able to reach the create stage, but in these 3 days of FDP. But primarily, you will realize that we all are going through this FDP, and actually we are using these concepts. While and precisely, I have used these concepts even to design this whole FDP of 3 days, and you will be able to relate now how the factual, conceptual, procedural, metacognitive knowledge is also applicable to FDP like this. So what we have seen, what is remember, right? And then demonstration, understanding means demonstrate understanding of facts and ideas by organizing or comparing, and some other keywords followed by that. Applying is solving problems to new situations by applying acquired knowledge, facts, and techniques. A very crude example of this is that if you are given Android mobile phone, and if you know how to set up Wi-Fi, and if somebody has given you iPhone and asks you to do setting of Wi-Fi, you know how, where this has to be done. You would be able to figure that out, and that is nothing but solving the problems to the new situation. Examine and break information into parts is applicable to analysis, and present and defend opinions by making judgment about information, validity of ideas is about evaluation, and compile information together in a different way by combining elements to a new pattern, or proposing alternative solutions is about the creation. So students typically, every student do not get um, uh, an opportunity to go through these all the 6 steps. But institutions invariably create such situations in which the student can take himself or herself through this whole 6 steps involved in the cognitive process. For example, if the institute organizes um, a hackathon, or some kind of interest groups are being formed, and they are asked to conduct some tech fests, or there are some international national competitions like Baha competition, or some other coding competitions, or some other competitions in which the students have to participate and create something based on some specifications mentioned somewhere, and then show that how he or she could apply the ideas mentioned somewhere in the specification and create something by using those ideas. And that is these are the opportunities for the students to excel themselves. So, but we know that these opportunities are not taken by all the students, and many times the participants number is restricting everybody to participate. But if there are enough opportunities and enough different types of opportunity in which a student could take themselves through all these 6 steps, naturally more and more students will be able to gain experience of going through all these steps. And so that's why it is these discussion is about thinking about what assessment tools have to be designed to be able to achieve these paradigm here. And this is about the program design finally, right? Our case study, our main idea is to design a program, and we are having this discussion between us to brainstorm about how to identify those assessment tools, and how to identify the questions in those assignments or assessment tools. So for that, we have to think about one more aspect when we think about how to frame the questions, right? Because assessment tools have to have questions, either one or multiple. And we have to think about how do I design those questions so that this I will be able to assess whether or not students are achieving the outcomes of the course. And hence, if they are able to achieve the outcomes of the course, naturally, it is possible for the students to achieve the program level outcomes, because this course exists because it is supposed to be there to help the institute, uh, you know, to help the students to achieve the program level outcomes, and hence this course exists. And that's why if the outcomes of the course are achieved, naturally, uh, you can indirectly say that the program level outcomes are also achieved. There is one question, let me address that. um, each course may be having KSA, knowledge, skill, and attitude. Is that one course related to PLO 25, etc.? Not to all PLOs. Gap in outcomes may be obviously after 5 to 7 years, not beginning to correct. Okay, this is the first question. So let me answer this. Yes, so each course may not be addressing all the characteristics. So it doesn't mean that, you know, a course has to address knowledge, skill, and attitude level outcomes. It is not possible. It is, in fact, it is impossible, and you can't have impossible. Let me rephrase that. When you are thinking about of a course in which theory and some lab and practical is involved, then naturally it is not possible for one course to deliver the requirements of all the program outcomes. But if you have a capstone project after the, let's say, the last semester, last term of the program is devoted to completely a project in which the student is supposed to use everything that is learned so far, then I would say that such a course, such a capstone project can address everything which is to be at the level of uh, program outcomes. So KSA, knowledge, skill, and attitude, all the program outcomes are covered by such a capstone project, but definitely not by the courses themselves. They are supposed to deliver requirements of one, two, or three, maximum four program level outcomes. But beyond that, I don't think that it is possible for a course to deliver those requirements generally. And it is not true that you can identify the gaps only after 5 to 7 years. That's not possible. You can identify the gaps, definitely. Those are also important. And but however, there are enough opportunities for the teachers to identify the gaps ongoingly every day, even when it's not only about conducting an assignment and then identify the gaps. Whenever you are asking a question in the classroom while teaching, and based on the answers that you get, you can immediately evaluate where the things are going, right? And that is also a kind of assessment only. Asking a question to the classroom is also a type of assessment, and that is also an immediate feedback for the teacher as well as everybody who are listening in the class. So it's basically it's a very closed loop system. It doesn't have to be waiting that long of 5 to 7 years. That's my response to you, sir. The second is, can the content of the presentation be shared with the participants? Absolutely, this content will be shared with everybody who is participating in this webinar. For that, if those who have attended the webinar FDP consecutively 3 days and also has attended all the quizzes will definitely get this PPT. Um, Next question is, does the number of program outcomes may vary from program to program at the end of? Absolutely right. It will vary. A management post-graduation program may have 6, 7, 8 program outcomes, but a 4-year engineering degree program may have 12 to 15 program level outcomes. A 3-year undergraduation program may have 10, 12 program outcomes. So naturally, it will vary. And this, as I mentioned to you, if we are now looking at a case study of program design, and when we were thinking about what program outcomes my students are supposed to achieve after they finish this program, and based on that I'm going to define, pick and choose the right program graduate attributes for my program, and then they will be called as POs. So this number will definitely vary. So thank you so much for your questions. We are now talking about uh, framing the questions. These questions have to be thoughtfully framed. We know that, right? And however, we need to know a simple technique of designing these questions. When it comes to outcomes-based education, the concept that is to be used for framing the question is as follows. So we know that teacher is teaching the knowledge, and these are the knowledge dimensions. So think of a question to be asked to evaluate whether the teacher has delivered the factual knowledge as per, and whether the students have absorbed that knowledge on this scale of cognitive process. So how do you uh, arrive at framing the question to assess the student where they are? So for that, the most fundamental uh, understanding that is required is that when I'm teaching factual knowledge, what level uh, should be achieved by the students on the scale of cognitive process? Are they supposed to be at remember level, or are they supposed to be at understanding level? So that is the first decision the teacher has to take. So here, I mean, the language that I'm using here to explain these ideas are from the perspective of a program designer. And what I'm requesting all of you is to think like a program designer. You are not a teacher right now, you are a program designer right now. And you're thinking about how this teacher is going to deliver the factual knowledge, and how this teacher is going to assess on what scale of cognitive process this student should be, and based on that this teacher is going to design the question. uh, we know that practically it may not be possible for all the students to immediately understand everything. Some of them will remember a few things, and some of them will hardly be able to remember anything, right? So you will clearly see these the buckets of the students who are into various uh, buckets of those who could understand it, those who could remember only, and those who did not remember at all anything. So these are the three different buckets you will be able to immediately see there. However, you still wanted to see whether or not students have, how many students have achieved the understand level knowledge absorption. That's the way you will have to design the questions here. If you are delivering conceptual knowledge, so naturally um, you may have to think about that whether or not I am expecting the students to be at apply level. Are they able to solve some problems after my this delivery of conceptual knowledge? And then how many of them are found to be at apply level? How many of them found to be at only understand level? They could not apply it. How many of them only were found at remember level? So that is the analysis part that you should be able to do after, rather the teacher should be able to do after the question is being asked and framed. So the purpose of framing the question is to be able to see how many students were at the desired level of cognitive process dimension. And based on that, the questions have to be framed. So it is all associated very closely with each other. What knowledge are you delivering? Is the teacher delivering? And what level of cognitive process you wanted the students to be at? Actually, now I hope that this is clear to you, right? So the question to everybody is that why the teacher asks questions? Is it to find the gaps in their cognitive process? Is it to know where do they stand as per the steps in cognitive process? Is it to grade their answers, or is it to pass or fail them? Right? This is a multiple choice question. What do you think is the right answer here? And this question that I'm asking is nothing but a small assignment, right? To asking a question to the classroom and seeking inputs from the students and assessing where how many students are we finding to be at what level of cognitive process dimension, and that is precisely what is happening. Has to be should be done by the teachers when they are framing the questions. Who frames the question is right now is not a question, is not a issue here. You may say that, somebody who is assigned to design the question bank will do this, and then the teacher who is teaching the in the classroom may use this question, the ready-made question bank, to ask the question. That is also perfectly fine, but somebody has to think about how to frame the question and make this question bank ready, which is addressing these knowledge dimensions as well as the cognitive process and the level of assessment, level of cognitive process to be observed here, and that is the way to the questions and the activity should be designed to see whether or not the students are reaching that desired level of cognitive process. So that's the fundamental input that has to go to our questions designing process. Thank you so much. Many teachers have answered this question about why the teacher is asking the question. Let me see whether there are any other questions here. Yes, there is one question here. Is there a difference between program outcome and the program specific outcomes? Yes, so this is actually a very frequently asked question. Uh, there is no difference as such. They are at the same level when it comes to thinking about creating a set of program level outcomes which students have to exhibit at the end of the program. They are at the same level. Or program outcomes uh, may have the direct relationship with the, let's say, the graduate attributes. You pick and choose, you've chosen some of the graduate attributes to be part of your program outcomes, but you believe that some of the program outcomes which you wanted to be part of your program are not there, or not elaborately, or not, there are no direct references available in the standard taxonomy of graduate attributes, right? And then you want to have your own program level outcomes designed so that your design of the program will be complete. So these are the kind of program outcomes you may call as program specific outcomes, PSOs, which are which you believe should be there as a part of your outcomes at the program level, so as to make your program design complete in all respects, so that the students who are out of the graduate process will be able to achieve those desired um, you know they uh, desired goals after they finish their graduation from your institute and going through your program. And that's why to complete the list of the program outcomes, you will design your own program outcomes, which are called as PSOs. So that's the simple answer to your question. So the next concept that I would like you to think is about this rubric. And I call this as a mental rubric. Um, this mental rubric is always there in the teacher's mind. This runs all the time. Whenever you are asking a question, whenever you are evaluating an answer given by a student in the, let's say, in the handwritten answer sheet is in front of you. You had asked a question of 4 marks, and this was a descriptive question, and student has written the answer, and you are evaluating 60 grade books of the students from your classroom, and you are grading the answers and assigning the marks. When you are doing this, you are looking at these answers from a perspective of some references. There is a reference that is always running in your mind, and that is nothing but a rubric in that is running in your mind all the time. So you will assign 0 if you find that explanation shows very limited understanding of underlying concepts needed to solve the problems, or it is not written at all. You will assign 0. When you will assign 1, when the explanation shows some understanding of the some mathematical concepts related question it was, and hence I'm bringing in the references like this, needed to solve the problem, you will assign 1. And then you will assign 2 marks if the you find that explanation shows substantial understanding of mathematical concepts used to solve the problem. And if you find something very specific in the answer, you will assign 4 out of 4 when the explanation shows complete understanding of mathematical concepts used to solve the problems. So don't you agree with me that you always use this mental rubric when you are grading the students answers and assigning them the marks? You are definitely. And if you now relate these the criterias that you are using, you'll find that these are actually related with the cognitive process which we discussed just a while ago. You look at these levels that I have mentioned here, cognitive levels: remember, understand, apply. These are actually nothing but the direct mappings with your mental rubric with the cognitive process. The reason student is not able to exhibit the understandings is because the student is not going beyond the remember level. He or she is trying to just recall what is taught by you and just writing it there as it is. But if the student is able to demonstrate that what you taught in the classroom is being written by the student by using his or her own words, then it is showing that the student has understood it. That's the reason it is not just recalling of the text given in the book as it is, but the student is doing something more than that. And that is showing the understand level. And if the student is able to show you that he as she applied the concept that you have taught, naturally the student is has reached apply level. So this has got a complete alignment with the cognitive process, complete alignment with the Bloom's taxonomy, right? You will agree with me when you look at this kind of mental rubric that is going on there. So now the next is to analyze the student performances with respect to that. So my argument here is that outcomes based education is part and parcel of our day-to-day teaching learning. This is not at all a new concept when it is actually discussed deeply and understood from the perspective of what exactly is different in outcome based education. So my argument here is that the difference in the way the teacher is going to teach in the classroom doesn't change. What changes is the methodology of assign analysis of the students' performances. And this sits on top of what we are doing every day. And it is like this. So instead of just grading the answers books and totaling the marks scored by the students and then publishing the mark sheet, what additionally we are doing is counting the number of students falling in each of these buckets. So we are talking about one question here. This one question is answered by the student, and then we are counting how many students were at what level. So now I'm giving an example here that number of students happen to be here in the first bucket of applied 12, so which is actually the desired level of cognition right here. And 16% students were here. 38% students were in understand bucket, and 31% students are in remember category. So this is how the analysis is done. But is this what was desired, right? And this is the kind of input that a program designer has to give to the teachers, that for a given course, for a given type of question, you have to find out how many students, you have to refer this baseline, which I am defining as a program designer. And based on based on this um, baseline of student performances, the teacher will have to find out whether or not those many students happen to be achieving these cognitive levels. So I may say that expected percentage of the students should have been 25 here, 40 here, 25 here, and 10 here, right? But in reality, probably there is a gap of 7% here, 8% here. There is a I wanted here 40% students at least, but there is a gap of 2% here. So what will have to be done by the teacher to push more of the students from these buckets to the next buckets, right? So we want more of the students here in this area rather than this area, and this is why the remedial actions become important. And this is how the analysis helps you in identifying the uh, slow learners or weaker students and plan the remedial actions based on that. So this is a simple extension of the current process of teaching learning, and helping ourselves in identifying the weaker students and planning the remedial actions. So this is the example of how a, our day-to-day teaching learning is closely associated with the teaching, the knowledge dimensions and the cognitive process dimensions. All we have to do is identify that every day, and based on such a mental rubric, mental calculations, and uh, do the plan the remedial actions. So this is about the continuous improvement that is driven through outcomes based education. And this is what exactly we discussed just a while ago. You have your program level outcomes. You are framing the questions so that you can identify the gaps in the cognitive process. And then once the gaps are identified, the actions can be planned. And then once the actions are completed, we can then go back to the loop of framing the questions accordingly. Um, so this is the cycle of outcomes based education, continuous improvement. Let me see whether there are any questions. Uh, those who are helping me in organizing this FDP, I would request them to watch the YouTube channel, and if participants are asking questions there, I would request them to copy paste here so that I will address those questions. Thank you so much. Yeah, so next section uh, is to understand and discuss deeper about the program level outcomes. And we are now already familiar with the three categories of program outcomes: knowledge, skill, and attitude. And we will extend that discussion further to understand its relationship with the courses, how we actually looked at the program articulation matrix, and then uh, we discussed it from the perspective of how the courses are associated with the program outcomes. But now let's go deeper, one step deeper in that, and see whether we get some new insights from the discussion. Uh, this now we have completed 1 hour of discussion. We have another around 25 minutes left in this first day's session. Uh, I will, the moment we reach 5 minutes before the scheduled end time of today's FDP session, I will I will address a few more questions for the day, and then we can conclude the session. So categories of the outcomes, program level outcomes, are knowledge, skill, and attitude. Uh, the knowledge dimensions which we discussed, which are associated with uh, the teacher's part of the process, where factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive, right? I'm going to establish the relationship between these knowledge dimensions and the program outcomes. So when you think about the knowledge category of the program outcomes, right? Here is the example. Let's say understand the the nature and basic concepts of cell biology, biochemistry, taxonomy, and ecology. Let's take example of this program level outcome, which belongs to knowledge category of the POs. So as a program designer, if we are thinking about what course will have to be designed to achieve the requirement of this PO, and this requirement of this PO is to help student achieve nature and basic concepts of cell biology, biochemistry, taxonomy, and ecology. What course will help student achieve this? And naturally, this course has to give factual and conceptual knowledge, which is expected here, and that is it, right? It doesn't demand procedural knowledge. This program outcome. So when you design a course for a knowledge level PO, it has to limit the scope of the course, has to limit to factual and conceptual knowledge. That's the idea here, right? It doesn't have to cross the boundary of procedural knowledge. It may, but you don't have to do that all the time. When you are thinking about the courses related to skill category of the POs, for example, foster analytical and critical thinking abilities for data driven decision making, for example. Now, how will you help the student achieve these characteristics or attributes or outcomes? Next PO is modern tool usage. Create, select, and apply appropriate techniques, resources, and modern engineering and IT tools. How students will achieve this? So it may not be possible for you to think about only one course which will help them achieve this. You may think about two courses. You may think about three courses collectively delivering the requirement of these POs. Or naturally there could be one course which is kind of on the boundary line of knowledge and skill, which is partly covering conceptual knowledge, partly covering some procedural knowledge. Also could be a course which you may want to consider to deliver some of the skill oriented PO requirements. And the third category is attitude. Again, look at the PO and think about what type of knowledge the student will have to achieve to be able to uh, basically act as a leader, or try to understand what how to become lifelong learner, or how to be able to work as a team member, be able to manage projects, be able to communicate effectively. What has to be done to be for you to, or for the students to get those desired attributes? That's the thinking required in designing the programs. If I would go back to the skill level program outcomes, here you will have to think about how to do something, the methods and the skills and the techniques that are required here for the students to achieve, and which courses will help the student to achieve those desired the techniques or the skills, desired attributes related to this knowledge. And that's why the courses which will have more of procedural knowledge covered in that will have to be designed. So that's the reason there is a very close association between the knowledge, skill, and attitude category of the program outcomes and the knowledge dimensions to be considered when the courses are being designed. So I believe that this concept is now clear here. how these three things are associated with each other, right? The program outcomes, the categorization of the program outcomes, and the knowledge levels to be associated with those different program level program categories, outcome categories. The question is to everyone is understand the basic, understand the nature and basic concepts of cell biology, biochemistry, taxonomy. What is, which category of the program outcomes this outcomes belongs to, right? We have seen that this is knowledge category. The second example here belongs to second example belongs to attitude category, because it's talking about personal values, apply ethical principles in professional and social context is what the attitude category example. The third is foster analytical and critical thinking abilities for data driven decision making is an example of skill category of the POs. So thank you so much for the responses in the chat box. So now let me ask questions, if any, before we go to the next section of this FDP session. I'm accessing the questions from the chat box. General comment here is by Professor Ravindra is that we are not fixing gaps in PO. We are causing remediation of student. POs are well-defined, fixed, not needed fixing gaps. Gaps are in students achieving or teachers delivery to be fixed. Uh, yes, what I mean to say is the same, and that's the reason I was trying to show the association of gaps in the achieving the program outcomes to be found in the teaching learning process. And the question to you, sir, is how will you identify whether or not teachers, students are achieving those outcomes? Is how to measure that? The answer cannot be binary like yes and no, right? If you think about the previous example of the program outcome uh, here, uh, so let's take an example of foster analytical and critical thinking abilities for data-driven decision making. How will you identify whether or not student is achieving these outcome or not, right? How will you measure that? Out of 60 students, how will you find how many students are actually achieving this? So the answer cannot be binary, and that's why there has to be a performance indicator, which is the next level of the discussion about outcomes-based education. But I'm trying to avoid too many complex concepts being covered in the shorter span of this FDP. But essentially, you will have to think about program performance indicators to be assessed for you to be able to say whether or not a student has achieved a program level outcome. And the if you are finding less than desired number of students achieving those performance indicators, then the gap is to be identified based on that. And the gap means what? The gap is with respect to some baseline which has to be defined by the program designer. And an example of that was given by me when we were discussing the mental rubric. And at that time, I had given an idea of designing a baseline for uh, finding out whether or not the number of students found to be at apply level, understand level, remember level, are they as per the desired baseline? And this baseline has to be defined by the program designer. And then with respect to this baseline, the teacher will be able to then say whether or not there were any gaps. And that is about the gap analysis. So you will be able to identify the gaps at the program level by creating the program performance indicators around each program outcome. And that's how that is a process of analysis, which we are going to cover later in our FDP. Uh, are there any more questions here? Okay. So next is top-down design of a program, and we are now entering into a discussion about um, basically arranging all those courses appropriately, because so far what we have done, if we take, summarize the discussion so far, what we have done is we have decided to be a program designer. It's a case study approach is taken by us. Then we are given a task of designing a program from scratch. It did not exist in the past. So we then had decided to look at graduate attributes, standard taxonomy of attributes. We picked up some of the relevant graduate attributes from that list. We added our own graduate attributes, and we started calling those as program outcomes, because now this list is now specific to my program. So now once the program outcomes are defined, I'm thinking about what courses I will need. And then I was thinking about how will I find the gaps in the outcomes. For that, what assessment tools I will have to design, and then how to frame the questions to be part of these assessment tools. That was the process we were following. And then we once we covered the main discussion about these steps involved in it, we went on to discuss the association of program outcomes, its knowledge is category of the program outcomes, its association with the knowledge dimensions. And then we are now entering into a discussion about top-down design of a program, which is going to give us an idea of how important it is to uh, create a blueprint of the program design, which will highlight many important aspects of uh, you know outcomes based education, and how it is going to help you in continuously improve the student performances by using the technique of outcomes based education. This blueprint will help you immediately identify the gaps in your current program design, which is actually practically being implemented by your affiliating university, or the autonomous college, or any other such institution you are part of it. You will be immediately able to find out whether there are any gaps in your actually designed program, with respect to this blueprint that we are going to discuss. We are around 5 minutes to go before we conclude today's FDP. So let's cover this concept, and then I will request you to ask questions if any, and then we'll conclude. So here we are going to discuss the first small step towards program design. So we know that we have identified a list of program outcomes. Some of them are belonging to knowledge category, and hence the course which I am going to think about, which will deliver the desired attributes defined by this program outcome, will also have to uh, deliver the factual and conceptual knowledge, so as to meet the requirement of this PO. Then if I would take an example of other course, which has got a dual association of with PO1 and the PO6. PO6 here happens to be part of skill category of the program outcome. So that's the reason I'm showing this box with dual colors. And such a course may have been designed by this we have to design so that this course delivers conceptual knowledge as well as the procedural knowledge combinedly to be able to fulfill the requirement of these two program outcomes. So we have now two courses here. One is fully dedicated to PO1 and another is part of PO1 and part of PO6, and that's why it is supposed to be delivering conceptual and procedural knowledge. So this is how I will design the top-down approach, or rather the structure. Then next is to think about course outcomes. These have to be achieved by the students at the course level, and this is what the teacher's responsibility is. But as a program designer, I have to design it. It's not the responsibility of the teachers to design the course outcome. This is program designer's responsibility. And then naturally, when a course is supposed to deliver requirement of PO1, which belongs to knowledge category, these course outcomes also should be associated with the knowledge dimensions which are related to this course. So factual and conceptual knowledge which is delivered by this course also should be reflected in the designing of the course outcomes of this course. Likewise, when I am thinking about course 2, which is supposed to deliver the requirement of PO1 and PO6, will also have to have course outcomes which will have to be measured by the teacher to see whether students are achieving the outcomes desired from the perspective of PO1 and outcomes desired from the perspective of PO6. So it is nothing but assessing the students whether or not they are achieving these course outcomes. Why? Because these course outcomes are related to a course, and this course is related to a program outcome. And so in a way, I am evaluating, I am assessing whether the sufficient number or the desired number of students are in the category of achieving the outcomes. We know that it is an impossible task to consider 100% of the students to be achieving the outcomes. It is not possible, and hence at least desired number, so that is a target number of the students, are achieving those outcomes or not, and that is what is to be considered here when I am designing the outcomes. The next is thinking about the assessment. So how will I measure the whether or not students are achieving those outcomes? Naturally, the assessments have to be considered here, a desired tool to assess, and then the questions inside that also have to then be part of this thought process, which we have covered when we were talking about knowledge dimension and the cognitive process dimension. So this is how exactly is the blueprint that we have to design to summarize the entire discussion that we have had so far, right from the beginning of this session. So this particular diagram encapsulates the entire discussion that we have had in last around 70-75 minutes. I hope that this is clear to everybody, and if not, please feel free to ask questions. Let me go back to the previous slide and stay here and see whether you have any questions here. Uh, okay, there is a question here. Can you please give an example for the entire topic covered today? I will definitely give this example. I'm ready with that. And the second is, what are the measuring? Okay, I did not understand this question. Please rewrite this, Professor Rushikesh. All right. So if there are no questions, how are we doing on YouTube? Are there any questions asked there directly? There are questions like, what do you mean by summative assessments and formative assessment? This definition of these terms is given by UGC in the outcome-based education framework documents created by them. However, to quickly explain here, formative assessments are the assessments that you will conduct while the delivery of the course is in progress, right? So this gives you uh, an ability to see how the understanding, I mean, the learning of the student is being formed, and it's covering the partial syllabus that you have covered until that point. And then summative means you are covering the entire course, and then designing the question paper or assessment tool accordingly. And that is a sum of everything that you have taught in the course. That's the reason summative assessment, that's the purpose of summative assessment, is so formative summative. There is another question: what is the difference between course outcome and objectives? uh, Actually, this is a confusing terminology being used uh, in the syllabus documentation. And before the time of introduction of course outcomes, course objectives were being defined by universities in their syllabus documents. And there must have been a sensible process and ideas behind defining these course objectives, obviously. And so in its own or I would say that for the purpose of defining the objectives of why this course is to be taught to the student, those objectives were covered there by looking at the course in isolation. That was input based education in of the early days. When it comes to outcomes based education, we can't look at a course in isolation. We have to think about a course to be part of the entire schema of program design. It can't be a course which is not playing any role in helping the student achieve the program level outcomes. And that's why course outcomes, as I mentioned here in this diagram, have to be designed by looking at what the purpose of a course is and what associations this course has with the program outcomes. And based on that, I'm defining these course outcomes. So course outcomes have an orientation towards helping the students achieve not only the course outcomes but also the program outcomes. And I think course objectives are limited to the scope of the course itself. So which was a traditional method of defining the objectives. This is how I would look at it right now. But slowly, when the universities would start um, adopting the outcomes based education, you would find that the course objectives will vanish and only course outcomes will be mentioned there. So until such time, there could be some confusion always there. I think we have reached the scheduled end time of this day one FDP session. So I would like to conclude today's session if there are no more questions. Uh, Let me check. Yeah. There is one question by Professor Subhash. Acquiring a certain standard of interpersonal relationship, under which category would it fall? It will basically fall in attitude. because it is talking about interpersonal relationship. So it is talking about metacognitive knowledge. It is about how to lead themselves and how to lead others, how to communicate with others. It is about soft skills. It is about metacognitive skills, and that is why it is part of attitude level POs. I hope that I have answered your question, sir. Another question is from YouTube: is always top-down approach remains beneficial? Uh, I wouldn't compare, top-down versus some bottoms-up approach. Here, in terms of outcomes-based education, there is no alternative to go from top to bottom, because first of all, we have to think about graduate attributes. First, then we have to think about program outcomes. Then we have to think about courses. Then we have to think about assessment tools. Then we have to think about questions. And this is what the top-down approach is. And there is no other way. This is the only way. But I don't want to compare it with bottoms-up approach, because I don't find any purpose of going from bottoms up. If the students are not achieving any meaningful objectives out at the end of the program, I don't know what is the purpose of that higher education is. And that's why bottoms up program design is it's unthinkable. Thank you so much for your participation and very actively be very active here and asking questions. I'm very glad and very happy to answer those questions. Tomorrow I will announce the modus, the model. I mean the way uh, this would be conducted, either through the same channel of YouTube live or some other ways and means. I will take a call on that and announce that in our group, as well as I will send emails. Um, uh, and then stay tuned. In the meantime, if you have if you have any questions, please do ask those in our Telegram group. I will try to address as many as possible questions. Thank you so much for your participation. Yes, so thank you for asking about the feedback link. We will announce send this feedback link on the Telegram group, as well as I will send an email. Uh, there will be uh, there will be a quiz there. We would request you to attend the quiz. Thank you so much.